Hello everybody and welcome back to another tutorial. So today's tutorial is continuing on the how to make clothing little mini series that I'm doing with an asset that I am making. If you are wanting to know how to start making clothing, definitely go check out the video that's just before this one where we actually built out our robe. I have lots of little tips and tricks that I just kind of generally do and know of while I was making it that I kind of explained as much as I could to help you guys be able to create any kind of clothing that you want. So this is a continuation of that, but I wanted to keep it separate just in case somebody already knows how to do one thing but doesn't know how to do another thing. I wanted to keep the videos separated so that it was just a little bit easier for people to find what they needed. So like I said, if you're wanting to start getting into clothing creating and you don't know how to start, then definitely head over to the video just before this one, and I'll show you guys in that video how to actually sculpt out your clothing, kind of get it started and get it made. So this video, speaking of sculpting, is actually going to be about sculpting, like proper true sculpting, in getting it to fit, adding all your folds, your little details, things like that, and prepping the asset with UV mapping to get it ready for texturing, which will be in Substance Painter, which is going to be in a different tutorial. So in this tutorial, I'm using a robe that is a Nitro asset for my Discord server. It will also be available for sale. And I'm just going to pick up exactly where I left off from the last tutorial, which is we have it made, but the wireframe and the poly count need a little bit of work and optimizing. And of course, I haven't done any sculpting or added the belt. So we're going to do all of that today and prep it up for UV mapping. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Alright, so this is exactly where I left off from the last tutorial. I am going to just do a really quick time lapse. And I'm going to make like a little wraparound belt for the robe. I thought about just doing that off camera, but I think I would like to go ahead and include it as a time lapse just so that you guys can kind of see like another little example of how small details like that can be made to add to your assets to give it a little bit extra of something. And it's the exact same process as how we made the robe using the plane and the subdivision modifier. So I'm just going to kind of do that in real quick so that I can confidently say that everything on this robe is made on screen with you guys. So I'm just going to do that as a quick time lapse, and then we will get into working on our wireframe. And once we get the wireframe adjusted how we want it to be, then we will start working on our sculpting, and I will explain in just a minute why that is important. But real quick, let me make that belt real quick. I'm going to stop the time lapse real quick. I just want to explain because I don't want anyone to get upset. I know I am not making the bow on camera, but that is because I made this bow for another Valentine's set that I just recently released, and I actually really like this bow, and I don't want to try to... Pardon me, I don't want to have to worry about like redoing it, I guess, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just be using this bow, but I will show you guys, I promise I will show you how I normally make my bows. Yeah, I'll still show you guys how I make it, I promise. I'm just not going to do it, like make it again for this Nitro asset, since I already have like literally just a few weeks ago made a bow that I really like that I think would look really cute. So give me just a few seconds to kind of finish fixing this up a little bit, and I'll go through and I'll kind of do like a quick little explanation of how I made the bow. It's the process is pretty much the exact same as what I've been doing. I just used planes. But yeah, ta-da! So, okay. So if we come over here, and we have our plane. I went through and I did a subdivision surface, upped it to 2, And you can add a mirror modifier if you want. I think what I specifically did was I mirrored it on the body and it just stayed in this point of view. Drag these two in, clipping, turned on. I know that they're not, just drag it up. So then I grabbed these two and I stayed on this outside perspective so that if you turn off your grid, you can see it a little bit better. But so I could just see that these vertices, and it's super hard to see, but you see this? That is your bow. So I just kind of go off of the like lines and boop, boop. Ta-da. Right. And let's do shade smooth. And then you could go through and be like, okay, well actually, oops. I want this to be a little bit wider. I want this down. And then maybe you're like, oh, I absolutely hate it all. I want it to have more. You could select it all and do subdivide. And now you have like extra points in between everything. And you can make it a little bit cleaner that way. Keeping in mind that you already have subdivision surface on it. So you don't want to really subdivide it like too crazy. That's gonna make it like super high poly. Right, and then you could do something like this, which is what I did, and I just grabbed these outer points and used S to scale with proportional editing still turned on, which we talked a lot about in the previous tutorial. It's just this button up here and I leave it to connected only. You could do something like that, and then you could again come through and just kind of adjust like little spots that you feel need it. And then you could take, what I normally do is kind of like pinch in this middle part just so that it's like really nice. I don't know, like pinched like a normal bow is. And then I did the same thing with a plane, and I just made a plane a circle, wrapped it around the middle, and then two planes going out. So that it would end up looking something like this. Ta-da. Like, it's just planes. Like, I don't know. It's just, I use planes for everything. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of show like a very quick example of how I made the bow, but I didn't want to go through and completely remake it because I like how this one turned out. I worked a long time for this shape, and I wasn't too sure if I was even going to do a bow for this asset. I was initially thinking I was just gonna kind of have it like looped around, like very loosely tied kind of a vibe. But as I was putting it together, I was like, you know what? I think a bow would look cute. I know a lot of people, especially for like Valentine's Day, which is around the time that I'm making this, like bows and stuff on their avatars and on their assets. And it's like, you know what? We're just gonna do the thing. We're just gonna add a bow. So that's why we made it. And I'm sorry I didn't do like a full length tutorial on it, but I don't really know what else I could say for it other than what I've already shown you guys. So I hope that's okay. But yeah, all I did was use a plane. I'm just kind of pulling these back because they were kind of curved inward for that other asset set that I imported in, if you guys saw that. So now she has a cute little bow, which I think I like more. So yeah, that's done. Okay, so I'm not gonna worry too much about this, so I'm just gonna bow. Oh no. Oh, hello. Oh god, where are you? Bow. I'm just gonna hide that because we don't need to worry about that. So this is still on subdivision. I'm gonna go ahead and apply that. And this is obviously not been decimated. So there's a few different ways that you could go through when it comes to cleaning up your wireframe of your asset. You could use a modifier called decimate. Where is it? There it is. Decimate, unsubdivide, and you can up it. It's not going to show you right now because we are still on our material preview and we are in edit mode. So if you go to object mode and go to wireframe, you can actually watch it change there. Something like this wouldn't be horrible, but this is kind of what I was talking about in the last video. Like, see where the torso has like a lot more edges and lines than this does. And then same thing with the arm. That's going to cause clipping 110%. So basically, since this part, you really got to think of where do parts bend, and then like the chest area and stuff. Wouldn't stretch too bad, but it would stretch a bit. Armpits might be okay down here, but up here probably not. You could always go into x-ray mode if you get it to work. Mine doesn't want to work half the time. Okay, sorry about the cut there. My computer started making a noise. Yeah, you could always, if you can get it to work, it should be, where's the button? Is it in edit mode? Okay, yeah, there you go. In edit mode, you could always like jump into x-ray mode if you need to kind of, it's really difficult to kind of make it all out, but anyways, beside the point. I would definitely recommend kind of like looking at the wireframe of the body. I said this in the last tutorial to kind of like gauge how much you might need, because like I said, like if this is bending and this has all these different lines and edges and poly counts and this is super low poly, then it's basically making it to where the asset doesn't have enough edges and vertices to bend with the body mesh, which is how clipping gets caused. So totally fine to make super duper optimized assets like this. That's great, but just keep in mind that, you know, you might want to go through and add some extra edge loops to help avoid clipping. You could always leave it on something like 1 and do it like this. These are technically still quads, these are technically still squares, but they're also like diamond shape, and again, per other video games, it's probably perfectly fine. I've just noticed for the VR chat marketplace that wireframes like this, like, people just don't seem happy with. I don't really understand the whole reasoning behind it. And what happens in my brain is because of the way that it's angled, it's gonna cause clipping. So you can use the decimate modifier to make it a little bit simpler for you to go through and clean up your wireframe, depending on what you're making. I personally go through and recommend just edge dissolving. So like I said, we don't need a whole ton, but maybe these sleeves. So if I hold on, oh my goodness, I'm clicking all the wrong things, girl. So this robe so far is sitting around, let's round up and say like 10,000 for the belt. So let's say like 10,000 vertices or 18k tris. It's not horrible, but it is a little high poly. I'm probably going to decimate more down here before I start up here, since this is what is going to be actually like attached to the body versus this part I'm planning on rigging. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm on edge mode, and a lot of creators just recommend starting with every other edge loop, because something I said a lot last time too is I always find it easier to add vertices than to remove them. So if we do this and then there's like a spot that like looks like it's too wide or something, like we can always just go back through and add an edge loop back in there. But like, see all of these, like that doesn't need to be a thing. And the reason I go through and do it all the way around, you could also go through and like literally split it in half if you want to. I'm just being lazy right now, and put the mirror modifier back on, or you could do this before you applied the mirror modifier. But like right here, like that kind of bothers me that this isn't gonna, why isn't it actually? That would be it. That would be it. Oh, boop. I missed one. There we go. But yeah, you could always go back through and add them, and you can also do this before applying the mirror modifier so that it's a little bit easier. You don't have to go all the way through. But just keep in mind, again, this is going to come up here and this is going to like dissolve some of these things. So I might not want that for like these guys. Which that's when doing like edge loops can get a little bit more infuriating because it's technically registering those as attached. So I might have to go through and like manually select like, or deselect. Here, let me do this. So if I manually go through, I could come through and say like, no, please don't delete these parts, right? Or you could do C, which if you do C, it lets you like highlight it. And then if you hold it, oops. So if I hold it, hold shift, then I can come through and delete those because I kind of want the only issue is if I do this, that means it's going to be another issue of what we had earlier, which is that those ones aren't going to loop all the way through. The joys of optimizing assets. And I'm just going to do this like while I'm here with you guys so that y'all can hear me think things out. If I delete, it helped. The bottom looks a lot cleaner. I'm just not a fan of like how empty this is because that's going to cause clipping. And it wouldn't be bad to like add one just here. It's just, like I said, it's just not going to be as clean whenever it comes to texturing. But let's leave it for now. Let's leave it for now and we'll kind of figure it out. Something else, you don't have to do vertical. You can also do the horizontal lines and the edges. So if we came through like oops. It's not going to really affect the ones up there, which is kind of what I'm thinking about, but I don't know. Let's just start somewhere. I feel like this is like way too. And the reason why we say dissolve is if you guys notice, it gets rid of it without like causing issues. I want the armpits to have a little bit more since those are a trouble spot. So now we're already down to like 10K. It made that much of a difference. I'm trying to think, where would I want more? I feel like this is a little too heavy. But this is going to start kind of affecting the chest and armpit area. So if I delete, that might cause some clipping here for the chest, which is kind of where I'm a little bit concerned about. I might add those ones back in. I'm not like the greatest whenever it comes to doing my UV map, so don't take my words as like set in stone, this is how it has to be, because I'm not the best when it comes to it. But I just vibe and make tutorials. I just show you guys how to do it. I think I'm gonna delete that one and that one. It's a little bit more. I kind of want the sleeves, I don't want them to be super duper low poly because I want the rig to flow really nicely. And the belt isn't really too much of a problem. It's pretty low poly as it is. So I might delete a little bit down here. I'm just not too sure because I want this to flow nicely too. And I feel like if I delete these, I don't feel like that's gonna flow as nice. Decisions. I delete that, and that's. I feel like that's gonna cause problems. Oh no. What happened? Weird. I think we're gonna leave it. I think 10K isn't too bad. I could always lower the bow if I wanted to a little bit more, but I think 10K for this robe isn't horrible, especially since it's a long robe. If it was shorter, like, it wouldn't be near as bad. So I think we're gonna go ahead and leave it. It's just a little bit more clean now, but I do have some focus on oh, I didn't do this side. Oh no, I'm sorry. There we go. So it's just a little bit more, I don't know, clean. It doesn't look like it made like a drastic difference, but I promise it did. And I think I might just do a little bit more here. I keep saying I'm done and then I keep going back. I'm sorry. Never mind. I think it's just the angle. That part looks like really busy, but I think it's just the angle. So anyways, yeah, just kind of cleaning it up a little bit so it's not overly high poly. Like, we took off, you know, like solid like 8K tris or so. So I think we're doing pretty good. So now let me sculpt out that a little bit so I don't have to worry about it later. But now we are going to start focusing on sculpting. So if you need to, you can go through and sculpt to fix your base asset. So what I kind of just did is I just went into sculpt mode, used elastic deform, have my mirror modifier on. I just kind of pulled it out so the boobs weren't clipping. But if you need to like pull it in closer, or maybe like use the smooth tool like back here to kind of get rid of some of those bumps, or to kind of like fix up the clipping, potential clipping, especially like if you're using like the shrink wrap modifier. You know, you could use this. I prefer elastic deform to grab, but you could use grab as well. Grab just grabs it a little bit harsher versus elastic deform kind of does like proportional editing does. But like, I'm going to smooth out this right here because it's a little pudgy. And play around with your settings and your strength and radius and stuff. Figure out what works best for you. But yeah, kind of get it sculpted to how you want it to sit naturally. Like, how do you want the default asset to fit onto somebody's avatar? And I have the belt off center, so I'm turning off my mirror modifier to fit that because I have it kind of like lopsided. Something that I find very helpful that a creator pointed out is on smooth, if you come up here to, I think it's brush, this deformation, Laplacian, whatever, I switch between this and surface. Surface lets you kind of like smooth things without really like changing the way that the asset is laying. It's not really used for like right now when it's a low poly model, but for like high poly models, it's super duper helpful. It just kind of helps you like doing all this, not on X-ray mode. You know, I don't know, like it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of hard to show on this since it's such a low poly moment, but I do switch between those a lot. Just if I have like wrinkles or something that I want the wrinkle to kind of stay how it is, but I need it to be a little bit smoother, I'll change it to surface. But if I need that wrinkle to like really truly like I need you to calm the fuck down, then like I'll change it back to the Laplacian or whatever it is to kind of get it to move more. It's the best way I can think to put it. I'm gonna kind of, sorry for my rapid clicking, that's just how I sculpt. Okay, something like that. Okay, so, oh no, I'm so sorry, I accidentally turned off her robe and she naked under there. So yeah, so this is our low poly. So I am going to take this and this, and we are going to Control J to join. What the hell just happened? All right, no modifier. Okay. Let me check the... Nope, normals are fine. Interesting. Okay. Anyways, I don't know why it like got rid of some of the shading, but I'm down with it. So anyways, I'm just gonna merge these so that these are on one mesh, and I'm going to name this my low poly robe. I named them... Oh, I need the bow too. I'm so sorry. Please join. Thank you. I name it low poly because it's just easier to keep up with, as well as whenever we go to do our texturing, it's going to be very, very important for us to know which one is our low poly FBX and which one is our high poly. So now that you've kind of gotten it optimized, you are more than welcome to leave your asset here as is. Some creators do texturing through Procreate. If you are one of those, I am so sorry. I don't know anything really about texturing through Procreate. Or if you have a different texturing program, I'm not really familiar with anything other than Substance Painter. So I would definitely recommend checking out some other channels maybe, and some other tutorials that might be able to help you with the program that you're going to be using. But this is how I prepare. I'm assuming that UV mapping is going to be the same regardless of what texturing program you use, but I don't know if that affects it or if different programs need the UV mapping done differently. So I'm just putting that out there as like a little disclaimer. So I'm going to start preparing for sculpting and UV mapping to prepare for texturing in Substance Painter. So I keep everything separate. So I want everything merged onto one, so that whenever I go into Substance Painter, everything is going to be under one material. Now I can still texture things separately, but I want it on one material so that whenever somebody imports it, and especially for my people that do like quest avatars and optimized avatars, it's better for them to not have to worry about like multiple different material slots, because that takes up a lot of memory on an avatar. So instead of having like material for the belt and the bow and the robe, it's all just going to be on one. And I need to turn on, I'm so sorry, it's been out this whole time. Hold on, please. I forgot to cover up her coochie. I deeply apologize. So yeah, so we're just going to have it merged onto one, and then I'm going to duplicate it. And when I duplicate, immediately click, because whenever you get ready to do your high poly sculpting, you don't want to duplicate it and it be off, even if it's just a hair, because that is going to mess up your texturing and your baking to no end. So immediately click, don't move your mouse, just click. And we're going to name this high poly robe. Now, like I said, you can completely move on if you want to. This isn't necessary. You can move on and just use basic materials if you want to, without like an actual texture. Or you know, if you need to go to a different tutorial for texturing in different programs, feel free. But like I said, I as far as I'm aware of, UV mapping shouldn't change between different programs. And sculpting shouldn't be different for different programs, so I'm not too sure. So this is now moving on towards kind of that in-between spot of our asset is done. Like, this is our asset. The low poly version is, I'm sorry for flashing you guys, but like, this is it, right? We have our asset. She's ready to go. We could skip over to the rigging video and throw it out there and be done. But if you're wanting to texture, I definitely recommend looking into baking. If you don't have Substance Painter and you're going to be using like Procreate or something to texture, there are different tutorials out there that'll teach you how to bake in Blender. I don't know how to do that. I only know how to bake in Substance Painter. Baking is basically, we're going to go onto this robe and we're going to sculpt in like details like folds and creases and things like that on a high poly version of the robe. Like, we're going to make it way more than 10k polys so that we can get in those details. And then whenever you bake it, it's basically like printing the shadows from the high poly version onto the low poly version, which is how so many asset creators, myself included, can give you something that's, you know, 10k polys or lower, like a really low poly outfit, but it has all these details of folds and it looks like there's shadows on there even though it's flat as all can be. So that's what we're going to prepare for. So hide your low poly version. We have our high poly, and I'm going to go back onto our modifiers and I'm going to add back on the subdivision surface just to show you guys what we're doing. If we go, oh, is it not doing? Right, because it's subdivision. I'm so stupid. Never mind. Pardon me, I've had a lot of caffeine today, so I'm just gonna up it. I normally go up to like 4, but as you can see, my computer starts lagging. This is where I stop. I'm gonna hit apply because my computer can't handle any more than that. And now if we go over to the wireframe spot, this is our robe. It is now 2 million polys. It is solid black. If we scroll in, you can see they're still there. All of our little tiny squares. Look at the bow. Aw. Alright, so this is now 2 million poly count. Please be cautious of doing this if you have an older computer like mine. My computer is about 7 years old. I need to get a new one, and it is currently making concerning noises. Like, I can't go higher. A lot of people a lot of asset creators can. And in fact, this probably is on the lower end of a high poly sculpt. It is very high poly though, like, don't get me wrong, but I know some creators can go a lot higher than that so that they can get really, really, really clean shadows and sculpting and baking. But like I said, my computer can't handle that. I know that she has eyeballs now on her chest, and that's what we're going to call them for YouTube's sake. I can't sculpt that away. So the thing is, with a high poly bake, you need it as close to your low poly as possible, which is why I said whenever you duplicate it, don't move your mouse. You need to duplicate it and just click so that it is laying directly on top of our low poly robe. And you can see like where the differences is. So all that clipping is the low poly and everything else is the high poly. So that's kind of the best way I can explain it. Is like I said earlier, like that low poly just doesn't have a lot of faces and edges to bend and move versus this low poly does. So that's what we're seeing there, and you need them as close as possible. So I currently can't sculpt those little eyeballs on her chest away because that will affect the bake and the texturing, and I don't need massive shadow there on the final product. So the best way, it's kind of like I just said, like anything that we're about to do is going to be what is going to be baked into our texture for our final product. So be very cautious of editing things like that unless you want that on your final texture. So definitely keep on your mirror modifier, and if you need to, and I probably will for this to make it just I know you're lagging, I'm sorry. I'm going to separate out the bow and the belt because I still want to sculpt those. And we can join those back here in a second, but I don't want to accidentally sculpt those while I'm trying to sculpt the robe. So I'm going to separate those. I keep my mirror modifier on it. I primarily use the draw sharp, smooth, and then occasionally the elastic deform, and occasionally the crease. But those are the ones that I normally use personally. I definitely recommend playing around with them. There's all kinds of different brushes, as you can see, and we will get to some of the cloth physics brushes. I just don't really need a whole ton of them for this project, but we will cover those. So definitely play around with them, and like I said before, play around with your settings to kind of figure out what fits best for you. Something else you can do is on whatever brush you're using, if you have like a really unsteady hand, come through to your stroke and you can turn on stabilized stroke and see that red line. I use that a lot. I kind of switch it on and off depending on what I'm trying to sculpt, but it helps keep things a little bit smoother. And then, like I said, we'll eventually get down to maybe playing around with some of the cloth brushes to kind of add in some extra folds without having to do so much work. But I'm going to go through and just kind of show you guys where would be a good spot. Maybe back here. I'm going to just kind of show you guys like how you can kind of do this. So let's say we wanted it, and I'll probably go through, and I definitely recommend doing something that I'm not doing right now, which is looking up real life assets, like a real life robe, and so that you can kind of reference it for sculpting, which I'll pull that up in a second. I just cleared my transforms since the mirror was off, but you could do something like that, and you can go over it a few times if you want. right? So like if we wanted some folds back there, and you can kind of like carry that around. And this is using Sculpt Draw. Sculpt Sharp is going to like indent it. You can do something like this and kind of make those a little bit sharper. And I know it doesn't look like it's making a huge difference, but I promise it is. And then we can come over to our smooth. Oh, which I still have set to surface. So Laplacian. I'm gonna smooth out some of these rough bits where it kind of fell off there. And see how it's kind of like smoothing out those shadows on the edge. Like, think of sculpting your clothing as literally like painting on the shadows. So if you've ever done any kind of like drawing or anything before, or watched painters on like TV or something, that's pretty much what sculpting your clothing is you're painting out where you want like folds and things to be. And then you can always up the strength more if you need it to like really settle down, kind of blend out. And pretty much what you see here is what's going to end up on the final result, but toned down a little bit. So from, whoops, this perspective, if we were to leave it like this, whenever we go to bake it onto our low poly, we're going to see shadows that look pretty much like this, just maybe toned down a little bit, because it doesn't get it necessarily exactly as dark each time, especially since we're doing texturing and stuff over it in Substance Painter. So like you might think like, oh, I kind of want it softer like that. Personally, until you kind of get adjusted to how the baking works in your own sculpting methods, I would leave it a little bit darker here on the actual like sculpting stage, and then you could always go through and smooth it out more. But I would personally leave it a little bit darker than what you're wanting it to be. And then you can, since in my opinion, since we do add like extra texturing and stuff on top of it, whenever we get it into substance, it's gonna make it a little bit lighter. You can always adjust that, but I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm saying it backwards, but I normally make it a little bit more than I'm wanting the final result to be. And don't be afraid to like leave like hard lines and stuff too, you know? Like truly just kind of play around with it and get a vibe for it. And see, now we have like little like edges. And it's okay if it's not like perfect, like there's kind of a bump there, because like that kind of stuff you're not really gonna see on the final product. It's gonna be more of like a straightforward, like it's gonna look like that instead of those little bumps. So I am going to step aside real quick and pull up a photo so I can get a better idea of where I want the rest of the folds to be. But yeah, and don't forget that you can always turn on stabilize stroke, as well as for the brush you can switch between surface and Laplacian. Surface, like I said, it's going to kind of smooth it out without really like deforming the mesh, versus Laplacian will. So it kind of is helping fix that little bit of a bump there, but I feel like I struggle to get surface to work how I want, so I just mess with the strength and leave it on Laplacian most of the time. Okay, so I've pulled up a photo to kind of give me a reference of what I want, so I'm just going to go through and start kind of adding in some of these like little folds and stuff. And I'm just going to kind of time lapse this, since it's just going to be a lot of the same thing. But yeah, just kind of go through and like play around with the different brushes. And definitely, like I said, don't be afraid to change your strength and stuff and kind of figure out what looks best for you. But yeah, I'm just going to go through and kind of start sculpting some stuff out. I'm probably gonna undo it and redo it 100 gazillion times. Once I get down to the bottom and I start getting ready to play with the cloth brushes, then I will stop the time lapse so that we can discuss that. But I'm just gonna start kind of playing around with where I want some of these folds to be and time lapse this. and be back with you in a minute, I guess. Okay, so I have finished doing the primary sculpting, and as you can see, it's made quite a difference. I'm not the happiest with the sleeves, but we're gonna go with it. So yeah, I'm hoping that I remembered while I was editing to put up some of the thoughts that I had as far as like little things that I'm noticing that I do when I sculpt that I think might help people. So hopefully that will kind of help you guys as well. It really just kind of changes depending on the asset and your own preference and style, but I just kind of looked up a robe, like a satin robe, and kind of went off of that as well as some of my own just, I guess, like styling and preference. So it's almost done. I do want to kind of show you guys some of these cloth brushes. Now I'm gonna put on a little disclaimer, I'm not the most familiar with the cloth brushes. I will link in the description a video that I watched to kind of help me start learning a little bit more about how to use the cloth brushes. I only saw this video maybe about a month ago and have only really used it like twice. So it's still a method that's very new to me, so I'm sorry this won't be like the cleanest method. There's like starting from I think this pose all the way down is like all the cloth brushes, so I definitely recommend checking out that video if you want to know how to do like more specific things, because like all of this does something. But I think it's this one. Oh no, my computer. Oh no. Are we done? Okay, let's not. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna remember. Hold on. Okay, my computer might not be able to handle it anymore. Oh no. Okay, never mind. I take it back. We are no longer doing cloth brushes on this tutorial. So yeah, like I've said like a few times throughout making tutorials over this past few months, I'm so sorry, my chair is so squeaky. My computer is like 6 or 7 years old. It's definitely going down. It's on its way out. And just last week it crashed on me like 3 or 4 times. So I think cloth brushes are a little too much for it right now. So I'm gonna wait until it comes back to life. And then I'll move forward to the UV mapping part, which will be the last part of this tutorial. I'm sorry I won't be able to show you guys cloth brushes, but I will link that tutorial down below in the description of the video that I used to kind of start learning my gosh, my mic stand is like squeaky. Everything is squeaky. But I will link that tutorial down below so that you guys can kind of get a better grasp on cloth brushes. So I will be right back whenever my blender decides to load. Okay, so it's finally back. Make sure the stream is still going. Okay, so it's finally back. It did nothing. So that's good. But yeah, nothing changed. I didn't use any cloth brushes or anything because it almost broke my computer. So the high poly part is done. I do still need to go through and sculpt the belt and the bow. But we're going to do that in just a minute. So what I actually want to show you guys now is the kind of to wrap up this tutorial. We're going to prepare our asset by UV unwrapping it, and then the next tutorial will be us texturing everything in Substance Painter. So now that we have our sculpt, imagining and pretending that we, hold on, because I don't like that part, pretending that we have our belt and bow sculpted, which isn't like necessary, like you don't have to sculpt all the little tiny things if you don't want to. I do, just because I feel like it kind of helps whenever I bake, to have those parts have a little bit of something. So we're going to pretend like we have those sculpted, but once you have your asset sculpted on the high poly version how you want, we're going to go back to our UV. You can do this before you sculpt, it doesn't really matter. But we're going to go back to our low poly version and go ahead and unwrap this. So to do that, the first things first, the most important thing I can possibly ever say, please don't make the same mistake that I have been making for like years and wondering why my textures were always like the worst thing for me to do, versus now I absolutely love texturing. Select A to highlight everything in your scene. You don't have to have your high poly stuff shown, but if you want to, you can, doesn't matter. But have A, Control A, and clear all your transforms. This is something that I have talked a lot about on the like how to make an avatar series, which will probably be coming out like after this one because it's just taking an eternity to edit. But we do that a lot whenever we make avatars, so that it doesn't mess up our armature. This isn't worrying about the armature, this is worrying about our texture. So I have actually noticed that if you don't have your transforms cleared, which basically sets the origin of your asset back to world origin, whenever you go to do your textures, like parts of your asset will have the texture like way more zoomed in than other parts, even if you're not doing that in your texturing program. So it just kind of helps make sure that everything is going to be seamless and even. So go ahead and do that before you do anything, because if you UV unwrap it and then clear your transforms, it's not going to like do what we need it to do. So go back into edit mode. I normally stay on edge mode for this, and you're going to want to do of course, the edges. Normally the like outer part of your, oh my god, of your asset. Just holding Shift and Alt to click everything. But also anywhere that you feel like a seam would be. So we do the outer parts because we need our texturing to know that, our texture program to understand that this is where the outside where the asset like ends, I guess. But also anywhere that you feel like there would be a seam. So like per like normal clothing. So a lot of times you'll see a seam like maybe like down the middle. Kind of like that, and maybe one up here on top. And something else, which I feel really, really bad for. Back some time ago, somebody said that they were trying to UV unwrap stuff and that they were having a hard time because they were told to put, as many UV seams as possible, I think. Actually, I don't like how this is like that one, so we're gonna move it to this one. And they were like, that's supposed to help, right? And I was like, no, I don't really think so. And I feel really, really bad for that person because, like, yes and no. It's not necessarily that it helps, but it's also not that you don't want seams, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Like, you don't have to have, like, here's the arm, here's the arm, here's the torso, here's the bottom. Like, you don't need them absolutely everywhere. But if you are having issues with your texturing, it very well could be more helpful for you to just go ahead and add some extra seams, because it kind of lets your texturing program understand like where stuff is. So like for me, and think of it as puzzle pieces. So for me, I kind of want the sleeves to be separate. And I'm actually going to undo these bits because I want like the main dress to be its own little bit, and then the sleeves can be their own little bit. Oops. Because I just feel like that's going to look a little bit cleaner. And I still want the sleeves like kind of split in half. But see, if I leave that like this, then this part right here in between the two is going to be marked as its own thing. So I might have to go through and like manually select the sleeves if I want those separate, which I think I do. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I think that's how I want everything. And then you like, if you were like, oh, well, the back is like kind of stretching funny or something, you could always add another one there if you needed to. Which I think I'm actually going to do. Okay, so I don't know, just kind of think like where, if you were like a seamstress, where would you be connecting the fabrics is the best way I can think to put it. So kind of get it where you want. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. And you're going to go up here to edge and you're going to do mark seam, and it's going to highlight it in this big red thing. I'm going to open our UV editing tab. There it goes. And something that I picked up from another tutorial that I found has helped my UV mapping a lot is go ahead and put your scene on the side in front facing view. So I click my Y and right click, or no, it's UV, sorry, and you're going to do project from view. So it literally projects it exactly how it is. I forgot to do the bow. I'm so sorry. Let me do that real quick. Okay, sorry, I forgot to do the bow and the belt, so now those are done. So yeah, so if we highlight this and we do UV project from view, it projects it from the viewpoint that your scene is looking. I don't know how to explain it. It just seems like ever since I've started doing this, it helps not like things not to stretch so weird. So over here on the UV side, we're going to hit A to select all, and you can right click or come up here to UV, it doesn't matter, and you're going to do unwrap. And it's going to take a second. It's going to unwrap everything. So these are all the different sections that we've made. So like this is the back part of the sleeve. So I would probably put like a extra line like there. So like that is this part, I think. I don't know. My UVs aren't necessarily the cleanest. I'm sorry, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to move on. So you could keep messing around with the seams to get things kind of separated how you want. And whenever you get it however you want it to be, what I like to do is average island scales and pack islands. So whichever one you feel hits best. But on the pack islands, this normally defaults to 0. I add the margin to 0.01, and that basically says that it's going to just leave a little bit of a space in between everything, which is exactly what you want. You don't want anything to be touching. And if you wanted to, like, you'll see some creators talk about how, their UV map is like really clean. You can go through and like rearrange all of this if you want, to make it a little bit cleaner. You can resize things, like if you wanted to make the bow part bigger, just so that it's easier for people that are maybe like editing through like a photo editing app or something. Just be aware that since we clicked to pack it, it's not going to let it extend outside of the box. You don't want your textures to go outside of this box anyway. So you can definitely like organize your stuff if you want it to. And like I said, you can go through and like re-seam everything to try to make it a little bit more clean looking on this side. But since this is just a nitro asset and this is just for a tutorial, I'm just gonna move along with it, and I can always go back and redo it later. But that's kind of the gist, and I just really wanted to be able to show you guys the gist of UV mapping, and I'm gonna completely own up to it. My UV maps aren't always necessarily the cleanest, but you really want UV maps to be super clean if you're expecting or wanting your customers to be able to edit things. So for like a t-shirt, you want the front to be separated from like the sleeves and the back, so that if somebody goes into like Photoshop or something and they want to add their logo onto the front of the shirt, they can easily just slap that logo on. They can see where the front is, slap it on, and move about their day. Versus if like you have the front like split in half, then that's going to be a lot harder for them to be able to add their logos. So yeah, I'm probably gonna go through and redo the UV map and see if I can try to get it to be a little bit cleaner, but that's kind of just the gist, which is what I wanted to show you guys. So go through, think about where the seams are going to be, mark those edges, and then hit it as mark seam, and then you can go into your UV edit and I personally recommend doing the project from view first and then doing the pack islands and the average scale. Doing the average scale basically means that if like on our thing here, so our bow, the quads are a lot smaller than they are here, right? But if we average them, then that's basically telling Blender and the UV map, which is what we're going to be needing to be so important for our texturing. We're basically telling it like, hey, I know that these are different, but whenever I put a texture on it, I want you to treat it like as if it's the same. I still sometimes struggle to get it exactly right. But that is probably because of my UV mapping and like where I put the lines. So like I said, if you ever are like in there texturing and you're like, oh, I can't get this to look how I want it to, just jump back into Blender and redo where you put your seams, and that will help a lot. I don't know how many times I've had to redo my seams to get a texture to work. So it is kind of like a little bit of a learning curve, and it's really just, like I said, just kind of thinking about where things need to be separated and then making sure that you do everything we did, especially with clearing your transforms, and that will help your textures to not stretch so funny. One more thing before we go to wrap this up, something you could do, whoopsies, oh goodness, it's going to try to load now. Oh, hold on. Okay, so something that you could always do, oh no, don't want that. You could always go pull up or generate a UV map and slap it on here. I forget exactly how it was. I'll see if I can find the tutorial, and if I can, I will link it down below for you guys. But you can always like search, just like Google search UV map, and it's gonna be like all these different like colored squares. And you can also generate one here in Blender. I'll see if I can find the tutorial on how I generated mine, but you can use that and then go into material preview, which I'm not going to do because it's going to take forever to load. And it's currently registering the texture from the bow, but you could basically put it onto your material, and it's all these like different squares that are different colors, and you can use that to see if any spot of your UV map is stretching. So if you have like this section right here is supposed to be, this section right here is supposed to be the number 1, but instead of it just being like 1, it stretches like all the way to like over here, then you know that you need to redo your UV map. So like I said, you could just like Google the image and then come in here and assign it to your material if you need to. But that is something that I find also very helpful to kind of check my maps to make sure if they're correct. Which I'm probably going to look at playing around with this one, but yeah, that's just kind of the basics, and that's what I really wanted to show you guys. So let's go ahead and move on to our wrap up and work on ending this tutorial. I am so sorry that my chair is so squeaky. I tried to edit it in the editing program to reduce the background noise, but if it's still there, I apologize. So yeah, in this video we did our sculpting. Well, I added the belt and the bow, which is no different than how we made the rest of the robe. I just used a plane and sculpted that out. And then we actually went to proper sculpting and we made a high poly version and used all the different brushes, you know, to add in our folds and stuff. And I am so sorry that I wasn't able to show you guys the beauty of cloth brushes in Blender, but definitely check out the description to look for that video that I'll link below of how I learned cloth brushes. They are great, especially if you have like a hoodie or something and you want to add like really big sleeves, especially like on our robe, how the sleeves are kind of flat. The cloth brushes are great for even low poly stuff to kind of give it some dimension, to have like folds and ridges, and then you can like really clean up the shadows for the high poly sculpt. So cloth brushes are wonderful. They're an absolute godsend, and they're great to use. I'm so sorry I couldn't show them on the robe. Like I said multiple times, my computer is just definitely on its last days, and it's really struggling to load the cloth brushes, so I wasn't able to show those. But maybe in the future, once I get a new computer, I can come back and do a tutorial just on cloth brushes. But for now, I'll link the one down below that I used on how to learn them. And then we talked about UV mapping, and like I said, I'm really sorry that my UV mappings aren't always the cleanest and the prettiest, but that is generally how you do it, is, you know, with the edges and the marking, the seams and all that kind of fun stuff. And the importance of the UV mapping is for texturing, and in case your customers, if you ever sell your assets, want to go through and edit things, it just makes it a lot of a much easier process for people to be able to edit things if you have your UV mapping nice and clean. So the UV mapping and the sculpting is more so if you are planning on texturing your asset. Like I said in the video before this one, if you're not planning on texturing it, then it's not overly important for you to do all that kind of stuff, but it is still helpful for people if they want to go through and try to add their own textures for it to already be done. But again, it is kind of hard to do it if you can't really test it with texturing on your own. So it's kind of a weird middle like situation. But that all being said, the next video we will be continuing on with the process of texturing and getting that done. Today was kind of a prep for it. So the next video is going to be in Substance Painter, where we will actually start texturing the robe and playing around with alphas and lighting and all kinds of fun stuff. If you are watching all of these in like order to know how to make clothing all the way through, finishing it, texturing it, rigging it, the whole nine, I do want to apologize for the Substance Painter video. It's probably going to be a little messy, just because there is so much that can be done in Substance Painter, a million different ways to do things, a million different little things that you can do to like change up your textures. And I've tried to make a tutorial for Substance Painter like overview multiple times before, and I struggle because I get so ADHD in there. There's just so much to do that the tutorial ends up just becoming a jarbled mess. So the next video is probably just going to be what I would do for this specific like piece of clothing. But if you're wanting to add like your own custom logos or like patterns, or you want to go download like new materials, I'm going to link in the next video a YouTube channel that I absolutely swear by, that has taught me everything I know about Substance Painter. And I'll kind of talk more about that channel when the time comes. But if you are watching these in order, I just wanted to throw out that little disclaimer that I won't be covering like how to add your own logo or import new smart materials or anything like that. The next video for texturing is going to be just in Substance Painter. And we're just going to be talking about baking, adding smart materials, maybe adjusting some of the colors, and then adding an alpha for the lace. I'm not going to get into all the other crazy stuff because there is, I mean, you could probably spend days and days and days talking about the things that can be done in Substance Painter. So if you want to know kind of more of specific things, then head over to the next video. Feel free to watch it. I'd greatly appreciate that. And then check out the channel that I'll be referencing in the next video for some of the more specific things that can be done. I think that will be really helpful. So that being said, I will see you guys in the next tutorial, whichever one that is. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.